Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Drawing Down the Stars. I'm Snappy, and welcome to the Occult Exploration Society. I'm joined by my co host, Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Life is beautiful.
Life is beautiful indeed. And we're back, and we're still talking about the wheel and Materia Prima. And now we're going to be talking about the goddess Hecate. Again, we're going to be exploring this in depth. And later today, we're going to be joined by our dear friend, Ammon, but Ammon won't be coming until after your presentation. So you have a presentation, though, for us, Dion. And why don't you set the stage? What are we talking about today? What is this connection between Hecate, the wheels? What were we talking about yesterday, and where are we going?
Yeah. So this is the continuation of the last couple episodes of the primal goddess, Materia Prima, connection between wheels and discs that you'll see these ancient goddesses holding. And in this case, Hecate or Hecate is known to have a wheel in the ancient text. And so this will tie into that. And we'll get into some other goddess stuff. And then, like, trigger warning as usual, we might talk about body fluids, sacrifice, ancient biblical texts. Got to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's interesting when we were looking into the iconography of Hecate. It sort of evolves over time, and there's these new things that get added. And one of the things that starts to come out is this top, this spinning disc that she's associated with. And sometimes it's depicted as a labyrinth, sometimes it's depicted as kind of like intersecting. It almost reminds me of like a Celtic knot. I'm sure you'll show us one of them. But
yeah, we have one in there.
We talked about it last time, but yeah, she is associated with it. The iconography with Hecate is super complex. When I get to my part of the presentation, we'll go over some of it. It's really interesting too. All right, so let me bring up your first slide here.
All right.
Okay.
So here you have her image with three heads, three figured, triumphant, with the tri prefix on there. And sometimes there could be three different goddesses or three different aspects of Hecate. Sometimes there's that column in the middle that you'll see, or it could be a head. It looks like she's wearing something on her head, but it could be a column. And in her hands could be different symbols, from a snake to a torch, to a pair of keys, a set of keys. Some of the animals, like I said, could be a dog, a horse, snakes. But in the bottom, you could see the bottom left, she's holding a disc.
Right.
In this version, in which we've been looking at in other episodes, goddesses holding discs, Cybele, Demeter. We're looking at Inanna, Ishtar, Anahita. And here you have Hecate holding a disc or a will. It could be symbolic of the will. Yeah, what do you have to say?
Oh, just because there's like this is such a really great image because it's a later image, but it's combining so many of the main aspects that we see associated with Hecate, right? So you have the triune goddess connected to the pole, right? As you pointed out, you also have her with the two torches, right? And this is huge. The two torches is a big thing with her. Here she has four torches. Normally, you'll see her with two. But this puts her into a special class of deities that we call the Phosphoros, which is the title of your episode, Hecate Phosphoros. There are several deities that have this epithet, and they're all a specific kind of class, right? You have Apollo, Dionysus, Artemis, Selene, Demeter, the Cori. It's like a all very interconnected, very interesting symbolism going on. And as for the triunity of her, you get variations of it. And there's a lot of wildness there. The oldest one that I saw it's Demeter, Hecate, and Persephone. And in some of the earliest versions, like she has variations on her birth. In the earliest written version in the Theogony, she's the child of Asterion, and Perses. But I'll show a version of it, like in the Ion by Euripides, he says that she's actually the daughter of Demeter and the sister of Persephone. So you're getting this interesting twin image that way, right? And one gets abducted and the other hears the abduction and then tells the mother and helps her to escape, right? So there's a trinity here between Demeter, Persephone, and Hecate, no doubt, that's apparent right at the earliest point with the Eleusinian mysteries.
I love that version, that she's the sister or the twin,
right?
Going to rescue. Because we'll talk about a little bit, get more into that myth as well. The Phosphoros, the torchbearer, the light bringer, the Lucifera. We've been talking about that. And so some of the aspects, people say Diana, Lucifera, Artemis, or Selene. There's different versions over time that you compare her with. And there's also a fourth version where there's four heads, or four versions where she has four aspects combined.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of different versions. So before we get into all the aspects of Hecate, let's explore the little disc a little bit more and the will of Hecate. Let's go to the next picture. So first I want to show you a disc that I wanted to include in the last episode. And this is a frying pan.
Oh, wow.
A frying pan, yes. And you could heat it up.
Like making flatbreads?
Yes, you can make flatbreads. You could place something on it. We've talked before about the breads, in the molds of the breads, putting symbols on the breads, and the cooking of the breads that could have ergotized wheat in it. And in some of the episodes back in the day, we talked about Albert Hoffman talking about the removal of the negative aspects of ergot, the alkaloids, and to make it more friendly or more usable was to skim it off with hot oil. I don't know if you remember that episode.
I do remember this now that you're saying it. I didn't remember
part of
connected to Hoffman, but yeah, that's cool.
Now, if you were to fry a flatbread that did have the ergotized element in it, that's part of the theory, is that it could burn off the negative aspects of that St. Anthony's fire. What they call the burning. Yeah, the aspect. So let's go to the next pic. And so here's one of these wheels that they could be holding in their hands. So in a lot of those statues and iconography, they're holding something. It could be a patera. It could be a cake. It could be one of these magical cakes right here, which is marked with the symbols. And so you could do that through a press or through the frying pan is one way to do it, and which could skim off the negative alkaloids of the ergotized wheat, making it more functionable.
Oh, this is so wild. This made me think, okay, so years ago when my grandmother passed, my mom inherited a bunch of these flat irons that were made for making a special type of cookie. It's like a real flat, large cookie with an intricate pattern, and the pattern is in the flat iron. And you would just pour your dough into this, and you could put it over any kind of cast iron stove. But she got these were common. Like, people used to have these cookie makers or these bread makers like that to press these intricate designs. So yeah, totally.
Psychoactive cake at that, maybe. So this is the next pic. Now, these discs, they could also be calendars. Here's a picture of the Egyptian disc or Egyptian calendar in a circular form. This is a very famous one. You might see this if you go to a New Age shop or something, hanging on the wall. They sell this. It's very famous. It's the universe or the sky or astrology in a disc form, and they could calculate using this as a calendar. Something that could be held in your hand at that. Go to the next image, please. And here is a Mayan disc. This is the Mayan calendar. If anybody's ever seen it, it's one disc that turns, but also a disc inside of it that moves around, and it measures the sun and the moon at the same time. Yeah, some of these little discs are used for more than symbolic reasons. They're used to navigate the stars in the skies. Like, let's hit the next one. Oh, this is a famous one here from, it's an Asian one. And if you see in the middle, it has the hexagrams, the I Ching hexagrams in the circle.
Oh, that's
as,
so cool. Wow.
as well as how that lines up to astrology. And so, and in the middle, it would, in ancient days, have a meteorite placed in there, and that has a yin and yang in the middle. And so it could be used to calculate. We used in the last episode, I had an image of a feng shui disc that's used to calculate directions in geomancy. Where do you place the front door of your house? And it's used for birthdays, marriages. Calculating time is what the circular function can be. Because we talked about the wheel of Hecate, the strophalos. It could do maybe a lot of different things. You know, just what are we thinking it could do? So let's hit the next picture. So here's an ancient stele from Sumerian times, Sumer. And you can see right there on the table they have is at the, what's it called? The Shumash. I think that star symbol. And they're worshiping the disc right there on the table. It has a function, this wheel. So wheels can have a function. That's what the moral of the story is. Go to the next picture. Oh, right there. Here's a Vedic one where they're setting the wheel up on a statue and they're worshiping it. It does something. Could this be the wheel of Hecate? Because people talk about it's so mysterious. What does it do? Why would she have it? What is it for? And what is that wheel for? Why are they worshiping it? What does it do? What is it for? And so let's hit the next pick. All right, here's another wheel. We know what this one does. This is a symbol for the Black Sun. And Nazis, SS, Heinrich Himmler had a castle and had that built into the floor. And they worship that disc as well. That's part of their iconography. These discs mean a lot of things to different people. To them, this is the symbol of the Black Sun, primordial matter at that, a spot in the universe where, what do we call primal matter, dark energy comes from. You know, I don't know if you want to say anything about the Black Sun before we go on real quick.
Well, the Black Sun is a really complicated idea. It originates well before the the National Socialist movement takes it over, and it kind of comes out of in the Greco-Roman tradition, the Black Sun is Dionysus. It's the inversion of light. It's the sun in the underworld, and it's that chaos, that womb, right? That inversion of the light. It's also an alchemical symbol, right? And it becomes really important within the alchemical tradition. And you get this whole thing about, think about the inversion of the sun energy, generation in its negative sense, right? That explosion of matter, right? It's really about the yin and the yang, about understanding the two sides of two coins. You have the light sun and you have the black sun, and together you get both of this. You get this clarity of images, right? It's unfortunate that it became associated with such negativity, because it is really about the changing of cycles and about the counter side to the light, but it's not evil, right? It's not like the sun is good either, right? The sun of the light of the day is good either. It can also burn you, right? These are just two different coins from two different perspectives is how it's supposed rather to be seen, right? But what often happens is that people want to reduce these complexities to these black and white dichotomies, whereas the black sun, it has black, yes, but it's not an absolute negative force. It's a complex natural force, just as the Apollonian is a complex natural force, right? The Dionysian is that force to expansion and to variety, and it also to conflict and into that kind of rebellious kind of nature, into that understanding and pushing of the limits. Whereas the solar aspect, the sun, goes towards that arity, right? To that refinement, to trying to make an ever complex, perfected image,
I love that. And you said one thing, changing the cycles with this wheels. If you can go to the next picture. Right here is a giant Buddhist prayer wheel. And in real life, that turns. These things,
Wow.
they're in the temples there. India, part of the temples, I wanted to show you last time that these discs in the temples on the walls actually turn in some of the temples. They're cut into stone that way to do something. So it's not just decorative. By spinning it, it has a purpose as well. Watch, go to the next image. Here's one of the Buddhist prayer wheel, and you spin it around like that as you meditate.
Yeah, I have one of these, and what it is, it's a very subtle movement, and what will happen is you'll move into this interlocking manner, and the idea is that when you lose focus, the prayer wheel will stop. So it is a sign that you're drifting off to sleep, or that you've lost your meditation. So real monks who are good at it will be able to meditate and have the wheel move in this very balanced motion without making any sound. Really, it's a really cool thing.
Oh yeah, and you can see the shape on top. It has the wheel, the steering wheel image there. That's deep in Hinduism and Buddhism. That deals with
wheel,
a change of time, cycles. The wheel of Hecate. Let's go to the next image. Here, this one is Persian. It's an homage. We were talking about Anahita last time. This is a pendant with the wheel. It's a fertility goddess at that on top of a wheel with their head there. And this is a pendant meant to be worn. But it has little notches on it, those little beads. You can actually tie fabric around that. There's a certain the dodecahedrons. We'll have them in the next couple episodes. There were bronze little works of art that were found that have little nodes, and they're little symbols. But they found that they use it to wrap wire and wrap fabric and cord to make rope, complex different rope shapes at that. So those little nodes around there has a purpose as well. You can wrap things, and it's used with wrapping fabric.
Yeah, those, I know what dodecahedrons you're talking about. Yeah, so this was a fairly recent find, but there was a scholar who put together a couple of papers, and there was a few artists who were showing this. But the now one of the interesting belief is that these dodecahedrons would be placed upon a pole and then be used to create a yarn pattern, right? A weave. You would be weaving thread around it to create a rope. Really beautiful stuff.
So they also have weaving wheels at that, where you could use the wheel to do other things, because that's what we're going to explore also with pottery as well. So let's hit the next pick. All right, now we're going to go, this is right here is Vedic. Last time we were talking about Bengal, those temples up there that had the earrings. We're talking about the Lady of Elche and where those earrings came from. And some people posited that they come from Chandra Kachurar, where there was a lady that had weapons in her hair. And there's all these different statues and stelae that show the lady with the weapons in her hair and holding the disc and having these big earrings connected to the Lady of Elche. Well, they found also there these things that are called ring stones. And they're famous because it's carved on the inside. And what they have around the edges is fertility goddesses. And they're also holding little discs as well. And they have the disc earrings. Go to the next image. There you go. You could see how it's carved even on the inside. And so some people will say, well, they were used as molds for jewelry. And you would put like gold foil on it to press the shape around it. But that'd be pretty heavy to wear.
Interesting.
But there's Anna Bennett is an author that talks about they're used in fertility sex rites. She put out a whole article about it. That part of these ring stones in these discs are used in sexual rituals.
How so?
Exactly. And that was the thing when I came across the other people that were peers that challenged her. That was the whole thing. Is it for contraception? Is it for fertility? People will challenge you when you talk about this stuff, these little stones. I thought it was wild. I'm just putting it in there because it's so wild. Let's go to the next
thing. Though, did she say that they're used for contraception? Like, what are they? How are they used in these sex rites?
You know, it was behind a paywall. I wasn't going to pay to find out.
Ridiculous.
Got to pay to play. I guess that's the moral of the story, huh?
Yeah.
These are Etruscan tombs where they're holding the discs on the tomb. That will. Is it a patera? Everyone keeps saying it's patera, and so that you put some wine in and drink. Here it looks like something a little different. It looks like those earrings. It's thick, like a chakra, maybe has a purpose. If you go to the next image, here you go. That's one of the Gauli priestesses.
Right.
For Cybele, holding that same disc, that same style. It has some kind of fertility or has some kind of purpose. It does something. Otherwise, it wouldn't always be in the image. Why do they have this around so much?
See, I think this is related to the Dionysian festivity rites, because you will see the men carry these small cups for drinking of the wine, and then the women will carry the larger pitchers. So I'm almost certain, yeah, that's what we're dealing with.
It's a cup. I like that. It's simple.
But you're right. It's interesting.
So let's go to the next image.
Daytare plate, right? There's ritual significance there, no doubt.
So, because last week we brought up Heliogabalus.
Right.
I thought, well, we should touch on it a little more. On this pope, who worships Cybele and wanted to be a Gauli priestess. It made everyone mad. Here's a representation of them having a little party in the back, and they're doing triclinium style. So they're at a table, but they're laying down, like those Last Supper images. That's how you would be at the Last Supper at those tables or banquets. You would lay down.
Absolutely, right? And we got to, so a lot of this is accusatory, but at the same time, we have to take into account what we do know about the Syrian religion from things like Lucian and the Syrian goddess. One of the things that Lucian tells us in the Syrian goddess is that the priestesses, some of which are, these priests, these people who transition genders, right? One of the things with these priestesses, in order to become fully initiated, you had to shave your head or prostitute yourself, prostitute yourself out. And then one of the accusations against Heliogabalus is that he engages in this kind of debaucherous acts with men and women, and he is, actively putting himself out there at the temple. It could be debaucherous. It's also something that's associated with the cult of Cybele, so. And Heliogabalus was the divine representative of that cult. And the big issue was like, this cult had already been brought into Rome previous, but it had made its way now to becoming the central dominant religion, it's the combination of the mother goddess and the cult of Helios Apollo that get combined into this, this great mother cult that we see embodied in Heliogabalus, right?
Yeah. I wanted to add him because we brought him up last time. That also he's a female emperor in history. People talk about that. Go to the next pic.
It's complicated. I wonder, I don't like to use, it's hard to say what they would have called themselves. They do go through transitions back and forth between genders.
Yeah.
That became a huge controversy recently in a museum. I don't see why it should be controversial to call Heliogabalus a woman. They clearly lived as a woman, and they identified as a worshiper of the great mother. But, for some reason, it's controversial to identify as a woman, I guess.
and I brought it up because it was a controversy then.
Right.
It was. I'm bringing it up to show you. Even then, it was a controversy. They would argue over it.
That's true.
So here we're getting into even more touchy. This is Pope Joanna.
Oh, yes. Excuse me, sorry.
Yep. And Pope Joanna lived as a man. And, you know, the thing with Pope Joanna, supposedly the story is she had a baby. And that's the only reason they found out, that she was a woman. You know?
Yeah, when she died and they went to go canonize her, they found out her true gender identity, or her true sex identity, I should say. And they freaked out. And the story goes, well, this is well documented, is that after that, they had this rite for years within the church where they would make whoever became pope had to wear this special type of gown without undergarments, and they would raise him up on a chair, and then they would have some of the other priests check that he had his testicles still intact.
Yeah, they were worried. They were worried that a woman would be on the throne.
Right?
You know, and you could even see, look at the angel on the left, the cherubim. Where is it pointing?
Oh, wow. To the genitalia.
Yeah. They got to make sure. They're afraid. You know, so I want to talk a little more about the idea of the female popes and the female saints and cross-dressing a little bit. There's one called Euphrosyne, for euphoria, means joy, of Alexandria, who disguised herself as a eunuch, was a famous saint. And I only preface that because now I want to talk about Saint Catherine. And Saint Catherine is connected to Saint Catherine's will. That's how we're going to tie it back to Hecate, just so you know, we're going somewhere with this. So now I want to talk a little about Saint Catherine of Alexandria, Ekaterina. And this is where we will hear about Saint Catherine's will. If you were to type it in Google, they'll show you these images of people getting tortured on wheels.
Yes, it spins, and often she'll be blindfolded, and she's black and white. There's some really good imagery that Christine de Pizan had commissioned, because she had conflates Saint Catherine of the Wheel with the goddess Fortuna. You know, anyway, interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. And you know what, the story, they torture her at first. And I think in the story they torture her, and a dove comes to tend her wounds or to feed her.
Oh, wow.
It has some Aphrodite connotations with Saint Catherine. Let's go to the next image, because I actually have some images of her. Okay, so that's one right there. Go to the next image. Right there. There you go. Saint Catherine with the wheel. You can see she has a sword, because Joan of Arc, that's one of her patron saints, is Saint Catherine, and that's where she said she would see the iconography as a little girl with the goddess with the sword, and then you have the wheel right there. See how it has spikes on it? It looks pretty painful, but she's also holding a wheel or a disc in her hand. It's part of the symbology that goes back, even, you know, like I'm saying, it goes back to ancient times. And so the thing, they try to torture her. At a certain point, the emperor comes to her and proposes to her, because they realize that they're not going to kill her. So they try to propose to her. That doesn't work. So they put her on a wheel to torture her. The wheel breaks in a lot of the myths. And so, you know how they finally kill St. Catherine is they behead her.
Oh, wow.
And when they behead her, white milk comes out.
Wild.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. It's a form of lactonosis, let's say. It's because they say it's a milk. It's a form of milk that shoots out of her head. You know, as a matter of fact, go to the next pic. You know, right there. So even go to one more. Oh, it might have got skipped. Go one more. Let's see if I can find it. Right there. All right. I'm going to show you that right there. This is a different Saint Catherine right here. So we know St. Catherine of Alexandria, where we get Catherine's will. There's also another St. Catherine. There's St. Catherine of Siena. And her nickname is Euphorosine, joy, like the goddess Euphorosine. And here's her mythology. So to become a saint, this is what happens. She becomes a nun, and she's tending to a woman who has lesions and sores on her breasts, and she can't heal it. So she takes the woman's ooze and poison that's coming out of her breast sores, and she eats it. Now listen, this is a famous myth that people worship this. Later that night, Jesus visits her and says, "My child, I want you to feed of my stigmata." So that's right there, Jesus, the stigmata, you know, where they stab him in the side with the spear. He's right there feeding St. Catherine his blood. And you can see she has a crown of thorns on her head. It's a form of lactognosis or blood gnosis. And so with that, now you can go back like 4 pictures or so.
I just wanted to, before it makes me think of, we've done several episodes where we've talked about this, where we are looking at the rites that the Christians were doing in the catacombs and how bad it got. In terms of one of the most fun pieces of evidence we have about the Christians doing weird stuff with the bodies in the catacombs is the Roman response. One of the responses is to put literal cages around the corpses, and they had signs that were like, "Don't steal the corpse liquor." They would be draining these corpses of its liqueur for use in rites. You know?
Well, just saying that this is part of the mythology right there. So going more yet. So right there, that looks like a vagina to me. But in this grimoire, that's a representation of the wound of Jesus on his side.
Well, a lot of people have talked about this as a feminizing act, right? He becomes penetrated, and and like this is a part of his apotheosis to it, in order to transcend and become that absolute divinity, you have to go through that gender binary. You have to cross the other side. You have to fuse both parts of the soul and become one being again. And one of the ways you do that is through the dressing, but it's also through the wounds and through being through these sex acts and whatnot. There's even people make this accusation about other gods. Like, people will get upset about this. Take this as a grain of salt. But people talk about this too with Odin ripping out of the eye and symbolically creating a vulva on the face, right? Again, in order to feminize and to learn the women's rights and the women's magic. And even Heracles, the manliest of men, right, had to go through the rites, wear the girdle. He wrestles with that queen of the Amazons and has to die and be set ablaze before he can achieve apotheosis.
Well, let's hit the next pick.
One of the things too is, in order to make him achieve apotheosis, they drug him, right? And how do you think they're drugging him? With the alabastrin. They're feminizing him before they burn him alive and send him to the stars to become God.
All right, so here's an image, just because we're going to be talking about the milk that came out of St. Catherine's head and how the other St. Catherine takes of the side of Jesus a form of gnosis, liquid gnosis. Here's some images. Here's one of St. Bernard of Clairvaux receiving from the Virgin Mary the milk, the lactognosis right there. We've seen this in other images, and you got the wheel up in the corner in the window, that wheel iconography.
Right.
And this is the thing. Go to the next image. See, and right here in this one, the baby, Jesus, is actually pointing towards him, and she's squirting it in his eyes, not in his mouth.
Right.
Just say it. And look at the guy on the right. He's looking away. I'm not seeing.
We know about the purple in the eyes.
Just saying. She's aiming directly for the eyes. That's where Jesus is pointing, to the eyes. So let's go to the next pic. Oh, and there we'll take it back to Saint Catherine, receiving that gnosis. There's Heracles receiving, getting breastfed. But you notice that Heracles has a beard. This is an Etruscan relief off a mirror, Etruscan mirror.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Heracles is grown when he receives the breast milk.
Who's he breastfeeding? Do you know?
I thought it was Hera, if I remember correctly.
We'll ask the good doctor later.
Yeah. Go to the next image. That's Shiva right there, getting breastfed. A grown Shiva getting breastfed by Ma Tara. And what's that? Parvati in the background, I think.
Right. Looks like Parvati. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a grown Shiva getting breastfed. Just saying. So let's go to the next image.
So it's Hera. Thanks. Thank you, Ammon. Appreciate that.
All right. Since we're talking about Jesus giving a gnosis through his side, notice that Jesus also carries a disc.
Interesting.
Notice we think it's the Eucharist, but it's also a disc. To ancient people that couldn't read or write, but can see a statue or an image, they would see, oh, there's the God with the disc in the hand. Now, what it means, who knows what it means? Because to us, the Eucharist could be something else, if you see our previous episodes. So let's hit the next image. All right, here's another disc that goes with Jesus in the tomb. They talk about the rolling away of the tomb of Jesus. And in the Septuagint, they actually say they put a seal on it. It's pretty interesting, like those breads. Like, remember the breads I showed you at the beginning of the episode that have the markings and symbols on it? Imagine this tombstone having symbols on it. Because that's what it says in the Septuagint. It says they seal it, they put a guard, but it also says they put a seal on it.
Right.
So, like, do they write something on it? Do they put some magical markings on the thing? On these magical discs? The discs are there always at the beginning and at the end of the stories as well. All right, so let's hit the next pic.
Always solar discs. What's going on? Snakes and solar discs. So, I was waiting for the Egyptian stuff.
yeah. And a lot of this, I know people are wondering, what is all this about? I'm putting a lot of symbols and images in your mind for you to digest later. All right, so Hecate, all right, St. Catherine as well. The will. With St. Catherine, she's the saint of potters. Because we got the potter wheel as well. And the connection goes deeper because people will posit that the term Hecate is Anatolian, which is modern day Turkey. Some people will say the counterpart in Egypt. Some people say it's Heka.
I have an image of it. I'll show it later. Yeah. I think is that Hecate there on the right?
As a frog.
The frog goddess.
Yeah, and the thing is that Hecate breathes life into the beings on the potter's wheel. That's her connection to the potter's wheel. She's directly connected to the wheel because she breathes life into the beings that are born on the wheel.
And what's interesting about Hecate too is that she has this duality that we see with Hecate, where she is on one hand, as you pointed out, a nurse, a divine nurse who gives energy to people through this nursing action. Okay, but at the same time, she has this underworld chaos origin where they say she brings this night and brings this darkness, right? Which is representative of that frog aspect. And as the frog, she makes that sound, the roaring sound. And this is always associated with the goddess Hecate. So while we don't necessarily see frogs too often associated with Hecate, we have the nursing, we have the good and the bad aspects. We have the starry goddess connotation with the night, and the roaring. So there's quite a bit of overlap.
And mind you, this is just one version because other people were like, nah, she's not connected to that. That it could be a whole other different way. So that's the thing. The more you look into it, there's multiple versions. That's why eventually they had to put different faces on her. And a lot of the other goddesses don't got that.
No, that's not something you really see too often, really, in the Greco-Roman tradition, right? You'll see this idea of goddesses, but not a single goddess representative of multiple beings, right? Because she's not just three-faced; she's three beings, right?
And part of it is the crossroads. It can mean the three crossroads. In the chthonic element, like we were talking about with Persephone, Arcori, going down to the underworld and rescuing her with the torch. Imagine there's a dog down there in Hades with 3 heads.
Right.
And she has 3 heads, is in charge of dogs, and takes you through the underworld. It's like Anubis, that dog that takes you through the underworld. And in that version, I even found one where she partners up with Hermes and has kids with Hermes and has 3 kids. And it's Hermes and Hecate. It's hard to find that one.
She's deeply connected with Hermes. Like, well, she has lots of connections with various gods, but Hermes she has a ton of connections with because they're both these gods of magic and these gods of the threshold, right? They move between the realms, and they seem to show up in the same kind of places. Like I was reading, one of the interesting things I was reading about is when we're looking in the archaeology, they'll find everyone talks about the Herms, but they also find these Hecateon doing the same exact function outside of people's houses or at a crossroads. You'll have a bust of the goddess just hanging out there. You know, and it's the same thing. It's this protecting of the threshold, just like with the Herm, you know. So it's really interesting. They have this kind of parallel function.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hit the last couple of picks before we get the doctor on. This is called the Wheel of Sabu, which was found in Egypt, and
it's a spinning top.
Yeah, it's pretty big. And people argue over its purpose. What does it do? People say it's ceremonial. It's a ceremonial drinking vessel. Go to the next pick. I want to show you it next to the Strophalos. And this is the Strophalos of Hecate. It's some of the oldest versions, how it's actually shaped, what they represented it as. And then go to the next pick, and you can see it next to that disc. Looks awfully familiar in its shape and how it goes together. It's a ritual. It has a ritual function of some sort. So let's do the next pick. So before we even get into the Strophalos, this is from the Villa of Mysteries, and we showed you this image a couple times before, where that purple fabric is spinning like a top. And this is part of an initiation rite, Dionysic, Bacchic initiation rite. And the goddess behind is Erythian element with the wings and the whip. But there's something spinning, and it has the burning purple has to spin. And part of the spinning is part of the initiation. So part of it, Hecate's spinning is part of the initiation. So let's hit the next pick. And I didn't want to even show you this pick, but this is part of these rituals, because there is a dark side to Hecate worship. Chaotic side with the dogs. There's elements of dog sacrifice going back. They'll find at tombs and stuff.
It's a later tradition, but it is there.
Yeah. Well, not only do sacrifice dogs for her, but she's the protector of dogs as well. And she has dogs, just like Artemis. And in this tradition,
we've seen this picture enough, though. I'm gonna
go for it. Yeah, I didn't even want to show it, but yeah, they spin the dogs, and part of the spinning of the canine, the spinning of the symbol of Hecate, and it as a form of sacrifice. And it came up in the ancient texts. It's like, wow, this is what they were doing. Part of the stuff they were doing, because they were doing a lot of sacrifice. So that's why we gave you trigger warnings at the beginning. So, and now we can get into a lot of other aspects of Hecate. I just wanted to get a lot of those will symbologies out of the way from the previous episodes.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, to build off of what you were talking about there with the spinning of the top, right? And of the strophalos of Hecate. It seems to be related to the Maenads and the spinning and the dancings that the Maenads would do and the way that they would be engaged in the mysteries. So what I'm going to do is show just a few pictures about Hecate, and then we'll bring the good doctor on, and we have some sources that we'll talk about, and we'll have some fun shooting the crap about Hecate with Dr. Ammon whenever he's ready. So I wanted to show you guys, this is one of the earliest images that we have of Hecate. This comes to us from Eleusis, and it's called the Persephone Painter. And here she is as the person holding the two torches, and she is guiding Persephone out of the underworld back home. And this is also really important because she's wearing. She's wearing the pelops, which is this young woman's dress, and she's ungirded, right? She's not wearing any kind of brassiere or anything, So this is her earliest kind of iconography we see her associated with. We also have the same thing here again, right? Two torches, and she is in that dress of the youth, right? Of that virgin, okay? This is one of the most famous artifacts that we have from Eleusis. This is called the Ninian tablet. And in the Ninian tablet, what you can see here is, again, Hecate. She is the white figure here. She's wearing the white dress. She's got a crown and two torches in her hand. And she is leading people in a procession to the goddess Demeter, right? And that's her function, right? She is this torch bearer. She lights the way. And this seems to be what her function is in the Eleusinian mysteries. There's also references to her being at the front of the temple to come in at the gate, right? We'll see later here. So this is another, the crater was destroyed, but they've recreated the image. And we can see Hecate here is on the very, very far left in front of the gate, right? She is the one who is the gatekeeper. And this was found at Eleusis. And now we see one of the most famous images from Eleusis. This is a reconstruction. In the version that we have, her hands are missing, the torches are gone. So for most of history, people assumed that this was actually running Persephone. But archaeologists doing searches around the area found pieces of the torches and found parts of her hands and recreated this image. All right, we got the good doctor. Hello, Ammon, how's it going? Oh, you're muted, my friend.
Let me interrupt you. Finish your work. It's fabulous. Absolutely wonderful. Good to be here.
Enjoying it? But yeah, so this is really interesting. I'll show you all these pictures and then we'll chat, Ammon. So this here is the running maiden, which originally, like I said, was identified by Persephone, but archaeologists have now proven that it's Hecate. They found the torches, and this is a reconstruction of that image. And as you saw, it's the same image that we saw on the crater, or the Persephone painter, the famous pot that was found at Eleusis as well. And this would have been along the path. So as the initiates would walk down Eleusis, they would have to pass by this version of Hecate, right? And you can see she's wearing the young outfit of the virgin. And here is a really famous image I wanted to show you. This comes from Athens, and this is a recreation because the temple was destroyed, but this was a temple to Nike. And next to it is a really famous statue. This is called Hecate. Let me try. It's called Epigyrdes or Epigyrdia. Can you see that, Ammon? Do you know how to pronounce that? Alchemes, Epigyrdia.
Epipyrgida. Good. Yeah, good.
Okay, yeah. So this is the first time that we found in the archaeology evidence of the triform Hecate, the first version, and it was created by this sculptor Alcmenes and was placed outside of the Temple of Nike. Now, she does have versions in the literature that talk about her as triformed, but this is the oldest statue that we have record of. This is another statue that was found at Athens, and it's a recreation. One thing they don't show you here that was attested to is that there were remains of 2 lions, which they thought was really interesting because this is very imagery that's very similar to Cybele. And this was at a shrine dedicated to Hecate in Athens. I wanted to show you guys this, which is just from a related area. This is the goddess Hekate from the Hurrians, from Huria. And Hekate, it literally means the queen of starry heaven. And here she is as the nursemaid. And she performs also this similar function as kind of like this guardian of the threshold, the one who invites you into the stars. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then Dion was already talking. Here we have Hekate, who is the Egyptian goddess. Again, same kind of imagery, is a nurse to people and is the guardian of this threshold. So yeah, there we go. What do you think, Ammon?
I love it. I absolutely love it. That she who is on that tower, baby. You've got to dive into the one who works from a distance, right? How do you work from a distance? I mean, that's the concept that they're really pushing on the Greek side.
So I wanted to ask you about this, because when I looked into her name, right, the first thing that came up in Perseus Tufts was Hecateros, which is an epithet related to Apollo. And they said it's the most common epithet of Apollo, the far shooter. And it's also related to Artemis, the far shooter. So what do you think is going on? Why is it related to all 3 of them? They're also all 3 called Phosphoros, right?
Because they're all doing the same thing. They're working their will from a distance. So when Apollo pulls back his black arrow and bam, right into your Uncle Larry, and he's sitting at the table like, oh God, he falls over dead right in front of you. That is Hecatic power, right? Power of death. Power of death. She is that dark queen with the torches, right? But don't worry, she's got the torches. We'll find the way because she is that star. She brings that, she's that daughter of Asterion, baby. Right? And remember, I'm going to tell you one thing extra that I don't think you got. Maybe you did. Pardon me if you didn't.
We have more, but yeah, we'll see.
all the wizards know that Hecate joined in union with Hermes, just like you were talking about with their overlaps and their practices, and their daughter. Shh. Don't tell anyone, it's a secret. Their daughter was Isis, whom we also call the Medwa, right? Hecate is the mother of that divinely magical daughter.
That is true.
Over and over again.
I didn't see that reference with Hermes. That's wild. But I did see it with Helios, everywhere with Helios.
Well, you know why?
Aetes.
Yeah, right. You know why you didn't see it? Because it was in the under that they did it. They did it next to the river. Phlegethon, the one that flames. The river of flames. Oh, God, isn't that... So and how did they do it? They did it in that Asterion. They did it in that invisible place and produced the union that is Isis. that is Isis. The first time I read that, I thought, oh my God, what did we just flip poles or something? We just flipped to the underworld. Okay, I get it. Now we're just on that side. You were talking about the black star. What is their fascination? Claudian mentions the dark star and some kind of bubble. And it's an oracular bubble from Apollo, right? It's all oracular. There's these oracular. The other area of the Hecatic power is the oracular. They called Medea a priestess of Hecate, and they called Hecate her mother.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is where it'll throw you. At the same time, maybe it won't throw you. At the same time, they called her the Diana or priestess of Diana. Yeah. And actually, they called her. I don't think there was a reference to the priestess. It was just to her. They called her the Diana, Medea, daughter of Hecate. And at the same time, that's what it was. And at the same time, a priestess of Hera, right? You brought up Hera a minute ago, suckling Mr. Mystery Cult himself, Heracles, right? With all his eunuchs. and what is he? What is he doing? He's taken of that milk of the Hera. The Hera. What is that? Why did they call her while she lived Diana? Personally, Diana, and the priestess of Hecate and of Hera. It's a very peculiar, right? It's an oracular cocktail that gets you. What is that Hera? What was that element of it? Remember, this is Scythian, Amazonian influence. So it's the element of the Ares. Who is Hera? She's the mother of the Ares. And what is that Ares? It's a repulsive force. You might call it war, but it's a repulsive force, overwhelming force. And when you have that combination of the Hera along with the Diwanasa, the huntress cult, right? You end up with a very unique medic cocktail that ends up creating Bacchic worship. And so when anybody ever asks me about Hecate, I always say, there's a reason that she is right up front with the Orphic hymns. It's as if
Orphic hymn 1, right?
Right. And I know that could be arbitrary. It could be arbitrary. It's not necessarily in order, but she appears to have elements throughout, for example, that are the same as other divinities. For example, Melinoe. What I'm saying is it seems to be a reflection. There's a reflection. The divinity Melinoe, right? I had a very intelligent student put it together. We were talking about colors in Greek and the word chloros. And why does it mean yellow, green, or pale? How can these everything? Quince colored fruit from the Melinoe, right? Who is she? Who is Melinoe? She is the one, just imagine this. She's the one who controls the oestrus. So the mania level of this plane is her construction. She makes it, right? She can send out the oestrus, they call it, the oestrus. That side, and the Suda says that Melinoe is Medea, right? Why are they describing it? It's almost like they're, Lady Babylon is she of many names. It's almost like a mental construct that in order to see the real mystery image of her, you have to go through this process of all these little slices. She's also worshipped as death. She's also worshipped as death. Don't let that one scare you. So that when she comes for you as Lucifera, right? She comes to you as Lucifera. And you guys, you were talking about the connections between Hermes, I think it was Snappy Hermes, and the fact that they transit. It's about going across
the threshold.
Yeah. Yeah, love it. The dark star can take you there too. And there's an oracular side of Hecate that people don't really reckon much. But it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. It's what I want to do with this Hecate stuff is I wanted to go through a bunch of the different sources with you guys so that we can see and get, because it's kind of like this unfolding, evolving image is what I noticed. And in the earliest form, she seems to be not radically different, but different things are highlighted. Okay, so this is one of the earliest things we have, which is you referenced it, Orphic Hymn 1 to Hecate, right? And I'm just going to read it for us here so we can get a taste. I praise lovely three-formed Hecate, Enodia, saffron veiled of sky, earth, and sea, who celebrates Bacchanalia at the tomb with the souls of the dead, daughter of Perses, lover of solitude, honored with cakes, nocturnal one, protector of dogs, invincible sovereign, heralded by the roar of wild beasts, key-bearing queen of the whole cosmos. So I want to highlight this one because there's also, it's just like everything is here. So Enodia means of the roads or of the crossroads. You got something to say, Ammon?
Yeah, I just want to say you can go a couple layers deeper with the actual Greek. Look at the third line, the last word. It's Baccheusan. What is she doing, Hecate? She is entering the Bacchic dance, Psychais, with the souls, Nekuon, of the dead. So we're supposed to be seeing that Hecate is a dancer of the dead. And this is something you see with other divinities that you can then say, oh, this is that Hecatic type that is in this other divinity, right? One of the things that Malinoe does is get you to interact with the dead through isn't that gorgeous? Get you to resurrect, right? Those necromantic. Why does she have no girdle? Why does she have nothing on? Nothing in her hair. All those priestesses, their hair always has to be very specific ways. They're all characterized by different colored dress, right? And they all have their own characteristic style. And her follower's style is nothing in the hair, no restrictions, no bindings, no nothing. Because they're the ones who are in charge. They don't have to do that. They don't have to bind themselves. They're going to bind you. You know, look at that second line. Uranian, Chthonian, Dekai, Enalian. Those are the three realms. The Uranian, the Chthonian, and that which you and I call the liquid or the water or the sea. It's the source of life and generation when you talk about the Enalian. And she wields power in all three of those realms. Her Isis manifestation was from the banks of those burning rivers in the underworld. That is the Chthonian. Yeah. Her Uranian sucks her into that muse. Sucks her right into that. Did you notice that she's leading in the mysteries? She's the one who's leading. She's the one who's showing the way. Right? It's her who takes up the task, right? For the sake of Da Mater. I love that. And then creation-wise, in her we see that spark of creation, the working of the will at a distance. Who can work their will at a distance besides a God that creates? And people don't, I'm not the only one saying this, but there's texts that say people underestimate the extent of the control and power that is what they called Hecatic power. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I had the very distinct pleasure of standing in front of an Egyptian statue with a gorgeous lion's head. Gorgeous statue. She's a beautiful woman. Wonderful stuff. The power of that combination, that old woman-driven, drug-producing Amazonian society manifesting in one skill, and that skill is magic, and this is the divinity. This is the divinity of that. I love this stuff. Oh, and don't feel too bad about the dogs. Wait a minute. You were talking about the dogs. They are sacrificing the puppies. Why? Because everybody knows you can hear the wolves before you can see Hecate, because they're always with her. Those hunting dogs, those wolves, they're always with her. Why are we sacrificing the young? Have you never bred the children, the hounds of hell? Right? Hecate is the one who has that knowledge, how to take that puppy and turn it into that hound of hell. She's the one who does that. So when you hear her hounds, that's how you know. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to avert your gaze. Right?
Yeah, Jason, when he does his rites in the Argonautica, he can't look behind him, even though he hears her screaming and hears her dogs. He has to run in a circle. I think it's like 7 times, if I'm not mistaken. It's pretty wild.
It's going to drive you insane. It's going to drive you insane. But I just mentioned the puppies because they're killing humans this way too, right? They're performing rites of purification that are medical rites in order to advance and accelerate that child to a place where they are above what is mortal, what they call mortal. And in the process, they're killing, right? Some of them can't hack it, right? And some of the people that are breeding, also remember, some of the people that are breeding the next generation, some of these ethnic groups just flat out, they'll take the kid and freshborn kid and a mom will dunk it in a freezing cold river. And if it can't survive, then, feed it to the dogs, right? Why are we doing that? Well, I don't know why, but it's, or what the advantage is, but that's what they're doing. So you've got to realize that there's a whole unique and different look at breeding. Which ones do you save and which ones aren't going to survive, right? They're not going to survive. Sorry.
Right? Yeah, there's also some wild things I wanted to ask you guys about, because when I was digging into this, so one of the things, the honored with cakes. So this is something that came up a bunch at all of these crossroads where you would see these statues, of Hecate. At the crossroads, they'd also leave these cakes. But then I saw these references in Pausanias where these are offerings for the poor. It's not just that they're leaving stuff, but this is so I want to rehabilitate somewhat some of the Hecatic imagery, because yes, she is this goddess of the underworld, but the leaving of the food at the crossroads was a way to give to the poor. And this was a whole thing. And I didn't realize. I thought that was kind of wild. And her temples, they would go ahead, sorry.
And apparently it became an institution where if you had money, for the sake of poor people, you're supposed to fill these stations with good food as an offering to Hecate. And if you don't, I'm coming after you. And you're never going to produce offspring. I'll make you as infertile as you can possibly be. It's matriarchy that is focused upon reproduction. It's reproductive matriarchy. And I don't know, the food is supposed to be outstanding.
Right. And then one of them that was one of the most intense was digging into this idea of the protector of dogs, because the dogs of Hecate is a whole thing. And almost always it's okay with Hecate and with Artemis. I kept seeing the same story again and again and again. And I'll show you some evidence of this, but there's variations of it. It seems like every town in Greece has a variation of this story where there's a young girl who tries to assert her own will and then is prevented, and so she dies and is apotheosized, usually burned. And then they equate her with Hecate. They literally call her Hecate. I want to show you, actually. I'll just skip ahead here because there are thousands of these throughout Greece. Here's one of them. This is an actual tablet that was laying for a girl who was burned outside of Athens. And it says, I lie here, the goddess Hecate, as you see. Formerly I was mortal, now I am immortal and ageless. And they say that this has to do with Iphigenia and Iphigenia, and also going back to all of these variations of these girls who get burned, and that Hecate has to do with the Maenads and these women who get destroyed. What is your thoughts about all of these young virgin girls who become Hecate through the power of Artemis?
I'm going to add one more element to it and say they're all also associated with the drugs and the use of the drugs, and not the simple ones, but the compound ones that they use to kill in their hunting cults, the ones that they use in medicine, right, to kill or to heal in their medicine. And all of those goddesses are a part of that group, right? This is a technical, I think we're tracing a technical art through time when you look at this, and it's exclusively feminine. I'm sorry, but it's exclusively feminine. I wanted to ask you about that. You mentioned the eunuchs. What about the valuable place? You're talking about the virgin priestess, right? What about the eunuch boy? What is the place in human history of that eunuch boy, and why is that eunuch boy, which is, nobody worships the eunuch boy anymore, right? Nobody does it anymore. Why? It's an essential part of oracular progress, right? Why the eunuch? Whatever happened, Snappy, why don't we have the eunuch boys anymore?
Well, I think it's because it was a central part of the religion rites, right? We see it when we were talking about Heliogabalus. We saw it was, they installed the stone of Cybele, right? Her, I can't remember the word offhand now, but they installed her on the Saturnine hill. We don't know where she went, but they brought her from Pergamum, the seat of Satan in the book of Revelation. They installed her on the Saturnine hill. The emperor of Rome was the head of this religion who tried to embody the goddess and go through the rites of Attis, right? And we see this, right? This is the other thing. We're talking about Hecate. I kept seeing again and again and again these statues with Hecate bowing to the Great Mother next to Iacchos, right? There's this whole thing with Bromo and Bromius that keeps happening, and the Great Mother. So these two both bow to Cybele, and Cybele is that bigendered Great Mother. She is Attis after they've gone through the rites, is Aegisthus, is that intersexed being, right? Has a penis and a vagina, right? Like,
and don't forget the sexy part of the Great Mother too, right? That's why we include that Uranian emphasis that, oh my God, the universe is originally just the composition of desire and necessity, right? A bunch of nerds sitting around talking like that, right? And coming up with this kind of diagram of what the natural universe is. So we can't miss within the being of Hecate is an Aphroditic magnet, a sexual magnet. The drugs that they are using, where do you go? If your wife needs an abortion, where does she go in antiquity? She goes to see the priestesses of Hecate, and they will give her the proper drugs and the recommendations of how to use it, and this is how you do it, and this will cause the abortion, right? These people are the ones running the Hecatic temples, right? The Hecatic cult, I should say. And they're always extremely well versed in the drugs, right?
It gets even deeper. I just wanted to point out, because in the earliest mention of Hecate that I could find was in Hesiod's Theogony, and Zeus singles out Hecate as the only Titan who gets to keep her power, right? And when I was digging into this, I found this article by Carl Karenny, really awesome classicist, and he said it's because she is the teacher of the nurses. And the only reason that Zeus overthrows Kronos is because he gets taught the magic and he's given the thunderbolts. And he says it's because Hecate, even though she didn't teach him directly, it's through that Hecatic line that he gets the thunder magic, and therefore she's spared and protected. Yeah. What do you think?
It's all three. It's all three realms of existence or reality where she has authority. That Zeus, who's Mr. Successor, recognizes, hey, that precedes the power of Olympus, right? So she is continuously respected in those three areas. That's it. Her power is forever established, essentially, is what it's saying. That she who works from a distance can establish that ionic power. I think it's absolutely gorgeous.
Now, and I got one question. Her mother, Asterion, Asteria, is that the STR root right there, huh?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it's really important for people to recognize all of those associations, because we see them in the Orphic hymns. We see them leach out. The estrus, for example, that is used by Malinois, right? So what I'm saying is, when you read these sources carefully, you filter out the fairy tale and you look for just the anthropology. You can see, okay, wait, there are colleges of priestesses, and they have different sorts of dress, different styles. They do different things across time. They have different localities where they work and where they don't work. We have different customs associated with each. Oh, wait a minute. Lycurgus, that brilliant Spartan, at least they had one, said, hey, we've got to have women's colleges. Women's colleges. Why don't we have any women's colleges? So what they do, they made women's colleges, right? Imagine that. Imagine that kind of freedom. And it's at this time that the oracular system is operating. So Hecate is naturally going to be involved in how the oracles of Apollo come out, because it's her. Remember the social balance. I love the fact that you brought the idea of the banquet, right? Once a month, they got to go down there. It's this time. Everybody puts out really good food. The poor people come who don't have access to good food. They get to eat it. Hecate's happy. My wife doesn't get cursed and have all of her eggs fall out onto the floor, right? Do you smell the matriarchy? If you read that hymn word for word for Hecate, it's pure reproductive matriarchy, and it's martial. It's very active. You see a lot of death a lot of death associated. It's just like Apollo and Diana, right? There's healing cults, right? Apollo is a healing visionary cult. He's also the bringer of death, right? He's also the bringer of death. Wait a minute. I thought you said, what does this have to do with Apollo? They are all light bringers or dawn bringers. They're all functioning within the same anthropological. It's not a cult. Unions, temple unions, Oh God, gorgeous. I love that.
And I even see the crocus, that she has crocus, and the mother has the Asterion.
And why do you think? What do you think about the connection with crocus? Crocopeplos, right? Why? Is it another drug thing? Is it just strictly a dye thing? Because they didn't sit around. They didn't sit around and say, okay, what are our colors? Right?
I think it also connects her to one of the things where you see the saffron robes everywhere is in Minoan stuff, right? You see the saffron is they're literally worshiping the saffron plant on the Minoan artworks, right? And all of the priestess got saffron colored stuff. So I think it's connecting her to that earlier tradition again.
I've seen it in Linear B. I saw him trading in it in Linear B.
There's one thing I wanted to bring up here from this really cool book where they're talking about in Linear B. It's by this guy, Dr. Robert von Rudolph, Hecate in Ancient Greek Religion. And he's looking at the Linear B text, and this is what he says. He says, there is even the possibility that the three, Demeter, Persephone, and Hecate, were linked in the Bronze Age. The Linear B tablet from Pylos, dating to the 13th century, records the name Pere, possibly Pereswa, Iphimedea, and Dweja, who were apparently worshipped as a set. Dr. Berg speculates that the first name is a variant on Persephone, the second is Iphimedea, a possible alternate name for Hecate, and later on he says, or Medea herself. And the third seems to be the bright, wealthy goddess, which is a direct epithet for Demeter, right? Only the names in a list of items offered to them are recorded, so their significance is uncertain, but they're there on the Linear B in a set. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's when I was sniffing the Linear B, I was looking for drugs. So that's what really caught my eye. But that's exactly when you see Iphimedea, and if you've taken enough of the Linear B, if you've had the privilege of working with somebody on it, greatest privilege of my life. Iffy is this intensifier that they use. It's used over and over. It's a prefix. You plunk it on, and it just means that thing, but to a much greater degree. Right, the absolute of whatever that thing is. It's an intensifier. Iphimedea, right? What is the Medewa? And I kept telling people it's a title, people. It's a title, right? Just like Medusa, right? What is the language telling us?
It would make sense as Hecate, Iphimedea, because she is the grandmother, right?
No, Pausanias is it Pausanias or the guy from Sicily talks about in their lineage, Hecate was the mother of both Medea and Circe, who were actually sisters.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. I do have that because I brought that up for you too, because you told me about this a while ago. And this is one of the more wild things you sent me was Diodorus Siculus. Yeah. Let me bring it up here. And it's freaking ridiculous talking about Hecate as an Amazonian queen. Here it is. And Perses had a daughter, Hecate, who surpassed her father in boldness and lawlessness. She was also fond of hunting, and when she had no luck, she would turn her arrows upon human beings instead of beasts. Being likewise ingenious in the mixing of deadly poisons, she discovered the drug called aconite and tried out the strength of each poison by mixing it in the food given to the strangers. And since she possessed great experience in such matters, she first of all poisoned her father and so succeeded to the throne. and then founding a temple of Artemis and commanding that strangers who landed there should be sacrificed to the goddess, she became known far and wide for her cruelty. After that, she married Aeetes and bore 2 daughters, Circe and Medea, and a son, Aglaus. Although Circe also is said, anyway, it goes on talking about Circe, but that's what you were saying. It gets pretty freaking wild. And as the story goes on, it talks about how Medea, this idea of the savior, and you were showing me this too, the first time she's mentioned as a savior is because she resists her mother Hecate, killing of the strangers, and she rebels and runs away, and she sees Jason and his crew land and offers to protect them because she knows if she doesn't, they're all going to die. And she also sees a potential way to protect herself, right?
What did you think of Hecate's? Now, I said one of the things that we didn't focus on was the drugs. What do you think of that power? What do you think of that scientific method? Like, people are saying, "Oh, nobody used the scientific method until 1542." Right? No. Look at what she's doing. She's experimenting with people with amounts of drugs, and what's going to have what effects on people. That a genius. She came up with the use of aconite, which is terrible toxin, right? Oh God, thank you very much for bringing us these. So Medea is not gravitating towards the let's torture people, because if people are coming ashore, right, and they don't know better, right, then we take those people, we sacrifice them. Who do we sacrifice them to? To Artemis. And who does that? The priestess. Who's the priestess? She's the daughter of one of those Greek kings, right? So you see right away, this is a kind of a mixing. This is a mixing of cultures here, and it's far more Amazonian influence. And here she is. That's an Amazonian woman. Hecate. Oh my God. Amazonian woman. Don't look the other way. Or she's going to drug you. She may castrate you. She may turn you into a sex slave. She may sell you off. Or if you're daddy and you're on the throne, she may kill you. I don't know. What do you think? They said Medea was connected.
It wild to me because they say that her dad is Helios, and then that makes me think of the implications of all of that insanity, because she and Helios team up in the Eleusinian mysteries to rescue Persephone, because she can hear what happened, but she doesn't know what happened, and Helios can't hear, but he can see what happened, and together they are able to help Demeter, right? So what's going on if she's killing Helios?
Isn't it gorgeous? Isn't it gorgeous that it ties all into the mystery? These are all, you're finding mystery rich ancient sources. That's what you're finding. And it's gorgeous. You can track it through the drugs. You can track it through the purple. You can track it just like the two of you are tracking it. Right. And it's like mining, man. There's so much good stuff there. It's amazing. Dion, I thought your presentation was amazing, and I wanted to put in one other kind of disky kind of thing. There was a disc that we found from Festus, I think it was. It's a triangle, and it's got 3 different goddesses on each end of it, and a whole bunch of creepy vampire scribblings on there that make me afraid, because I see because I see what goddesses are there, and I see them Christing with the serpent. And I know Isis would be right in the middle of it. So I think it's glorious. I think the vein that you've opened up is glorious. And I want to say I love the presentation. I don't know.
I like when you pulled up the phrase there at the end that shows that part of the offerings was the cakes, those little psychedelic cakes. That's why I showed that frying pan at the beginning, because sometimes maybe they're holding cakes, those little discs, those psychoactive cakes.
Yeah, and if they're not, look, there's even another level. The trochiskoi, those cakes, they're also the little tiny pills. And you say, Dion, you said, hey, they put a seal on it, right? They do on
Got to
these.
break the seal too, huh?
These also, yeah, it's the symbol of the doctor that is the one that produced them. They put that on the seal, right? And then you can take that and you can administer it rectally. You can put it in wine, right? You can do all sorts of things with it. But yeah, Christing and the magic that is used in the Christing. Yeah, I love it. I've got another complete Christing for everybody to see. And what's funny is people come forward and they say, "Oh, you're just finding a medical reason. There's no Christing in the Bible." Did you know there's Christing all over the place? There's Christing all over. There's Christing and pirates and sex, drugs that end up sending you places. Oh God, it's I think the work that you're doing is, pulling all of that stuff out of the ground. Please tell me, though. Please tell me, Dion and Snappy, where are we on the aliens? Because I can't deal with any aliens.
Okay, all right. I fully agree with you. Okay, I think, I'm with you, Ammon. I'm interested in the classical sources, and in my mind, the biggest stretch I could give people is that if there are aliens, there's some kind of demonic prank. It's Dionysus run. It's Dionysus. It's Dionysus run wild. It's. But other than that, maybe we get a lot of chariots, flying chariots, goddesses on chariots. I don't know. I'm interested in the pagan stuff. I have no time for aliens and that kind of speculation. My head is too buried in these books.
Well, I think when they take enough of those psychoactive cakes, that's when they see the aliens and the UFOs come out.
Dion, please tell me. Just tell me this. Tell me this so my universe can rest at peace. Lizard people, those are not on the table. We are not.
The reptilians?
Yeah, the reptilians. Do you?
Well, when the spaceships land, that's who's going to get out.
Genius.
No, well, here, I'll tell you. This is what I've told people in the past about aliens. They don't pay my rent. So until they pay my rent, it doesn't matter. Until I actually see them myself. I need to actually see it. I got too many problems here to worry about than outer space. And these aliens, they could be ghosts. They could be spirits. They could be angels, cherubim.
Yeah.
It's just some kind of other energy that people can't explain, I guess.
Transdimensional. I totally get the transdimensional thing. I totally understand that when they're talking about demons in antiquity. Oh God, I love it because it's the integration of human psychology with nature. That's all it is. And it's absolutely gorgeous. The extra dimensional, perspective that you can get on everything. People would say, well, you don't believe in aliens. No, because it's too much friggin' space to transverse in order to get these different little things that are in isolation to produce life to go that far. Don't be ridiculous. Focus on the friggin' dimensions. Hey, did you notice somebody did a little rebuttal of me? And I'm not going to do a rebuttal of their rebuttal. They were doing a rebuttal that I had done, talking about them. And it was why is it, peeps? Why is it that they want to say I'm crazy? That's not nice, bro.
I think, it's very easy. The easiest way to dismiss someone's work is to call them crazy, number one. Also, you're engaged in a type of theatrical presentation and playing with satire. You say, "Hail Satan." You have a distinct accent and cadence to your phrasing, and people are just, they look at it and they notice it, and then they want to attack you. So that's immediately what they're doing. But it's just weak. It's just stupid. And the fastest way to tell me that you've never read or have no idea what you're talking about is to just start attacking someone's cadence or their character, you know, and it's just silly.
You know, well, if I could say one thing, I think a lot of people got a lot of investment in these mythologies and these stories.
Yeah.
And whether that's how they get paid, or that's how they're going to get saved, or that's how they get laid, for whatever reason, changing that narrative is going to change everything. And so, and also that theatrical performance element, that's the ancient way of teaching. That's how they did it. That's the mystery rite. As we're seeing, in all aspects, there was theater. It was theatrical. That's part of the presentation of this energy for you to get the subtle nuances of it.
That's the music at work. It's what makes Ammon special. It's what they want and what they hate at the same fucking time.
Well, if it's mania, stay manic, stay crazy. It seems to be working. I mean, what can I say?
I love that. I love that. That's gorgeous. That's gorgeous. I really wanted today, as I was thinking about, do I have anything that I could say that's the least bit significant? And I thought, you know what? You ought to try to hold up the eunuchs. You know what I mean? You ought to hold up the eunuchs. What is it about that transition that is so socially and politically and historically important? Why is that Dionysiac bi-gendered reality so important for existence? And I think I saw an army of young men who were fighting in order to bring that image forward. And I thought, you know what? That's Addis, and that's the Great Mother. And that's what happens when you enter into that special connection with her. And if you don't see a connection with her in that Hecatic working one's will from a distance, you're wrong. Right. I love this. I absolutely love it. It's good. You're talking about the principles of quantum physics that push the world is what you're doing. And I don't understand them. You don't understand them. But somehow this metaphor, this analogy has allowed us to be able to grasp on a little bit. And a lot of it is sexy. It's sexy, sexy stuff. It's funny. People are so repelled by the sexy. Think about, you were both talking about this. Think about the rite where you go and you celebrate Aphrodite with a complete stranger, and your community reinforces this religiously. It's something that you're supposed to do once every year. You're supposed to go down and you're supposed to be involved in this. Imagine just for a second, American, and we've got Americans and Canadians, right, represented tonight. I would have a very, very difficult problem going to a public orgy, no matter how well organized and medical it was. Now, despite that, I would go, and I would go religiously, right? In order to honor that purifying force that the cult is having on society. Because I'm a good member of society. I want to be like everybody else, help everybody else. You know what I mean? So I'm going to go through that purification just like everybody else does. And I tell you something, by the fifth or sixth purification, I'm in a different place mentally than I was before. And for some reason, as somebody of our generations, I would have a very hard time doing something like that comes from the people who created democracy. I would have a very hard time doing something like that. But who knows? There's some time to start.
But you're right. We live in a very different world, and our morality has changed. It would be beyond uncomfortable. But it was a reality. Lucian tells us this, right, directly in Diceria, and I keep thinking about this thing with it's not just the eunuch. We should expand it to that non-binary, bi-gendered form, because this bi-gendered form is essential to the mystery. We see it time and time and time and time and time and time again, right? We were talking about seeing it with Cybele, but I've been reading in preparation for this. I was reading Carl Ruck's book, Persephone, who's talking about this and was saying that what you're seeing with the marriage of, he calls it a marriage. He says it's actually a marriage, Persephone and Dionysus getting married. And he says that Hades is Dionysus and that this is an actual mirroring. That's what happens in the Dionysic rites with the Maenads, and that these two things are intermixed. And it's about, like you said, that celebration of Pan, the coming together of all forms in that orgiastic bliss, so that you can see the other side. You see the totality of forms. And we know this true because I wanted to ask you about this. So this is a controversial source. It's a Christian source. It comes from much later, talking about the Eleusinian mysteries, Hippolytus of Rome. But what he says here is too wild not to bring up. And he mentions the Phrygians, who were the worshippers of Cybele. So he says, and after the Phrygians, the Athenians, while initiating people into the Eleusinian rites, likewise display to those who are being admitted to the highest degree at these mysteries, the mighty and marvelous and most perfect secret suitable for one initiated into the highest mystic truths. And I allude to an ear of corn in silence reaped. But this ear of corn is also considered among the Athenians to constitute the perfect, enormous illumination that has descended from the unportrayable one, just as the Hierophant himself declares, not indeed emasculated like Attis, but made a eunuch by means of hemlock, still going through a gender transformation so that they can sing in this feminine way. That's what's happening here, right? And despising all carnal generation, now by night in Eleusis, beneath a huge fire, the celebrant, enacting the great and secret mysteries, vociferates and cries aloud, saying, August Brimo has brought forth a consecrated son, Brimus, right? This is what you were saying, giving that birth to the divine child, whether it's Dionysus or Medea, right? Or Athena. And either way, it's this idea of this coming together of the two gendered forms to create that bi-gendered, perfect child to come, right?
Exactly. And you're not making that up. You're showing from the sources. You're just saying, hey, look, you read the sources, right? I got one here. You mentioned Pan. I got one here. This is the chorus, Hippolytus of Euripides. And the chorus comes out and it says, Sugar entheos okura. You, O Cora, are entheos. When Dr. Ruck came up with entheogen, he took it from this word, right, and added on gin and to produce. And what is that entheos? What is an entheotic state in the Greek? It is what the author says right here, Euripides says right here. He says, it is the power of Pan, the power of Hecate, the power of the Corybantes. And we all know about the Corybantic dancers and how stoned those people are. And of the mountain mother. This is she who this is the Rhea Cybele, who works the mountains for Bacchus as the nurse of Bacchus. Do you see her power is the same as that Hecatic power, is the same as that panic power. Yeah, I love it. And that's in the Greek. You can't muck it up any other way. So they're looking at these functions, these mystery functions, as a way to really alter reality through the mystery. It's the reality of perception and understanding. And I think that's what the chorus is working on there with those lines, is they're saying, look, you are entheotic. What are you if you're entheotic? You have the God inside of you. That's what makes babies.
right? You've been possessed, and in these orgiastic rites is where you would produce the divine children, the children of the divine, right? Because they were inspired by the fertility rite, and often you wouldn't know who the father was because maybe you had the women had multiple partners that evening. Who the heck knows? That's her business.
That's why we're getting all the stories of so and so having 2 kids, and they look different. Right? Something. Could she have had more than one egg that was fertilized? Could there be something? She was in a rite, right? Again, imagine yourself going to a rite, and if you saw the boy who had been castrated as an implement of the rite, it may change the way that you think. They may modify, they may purify those things. What do they always say? They're purifying those things that are areton, things that are inexpressible.
Yeah, gotta strive for that arity, that excellence, right? Through Apollo.
And that's why they always have the lover. Apollo's always got his lover, his young boy lover, right? Now, people say I had a great interview with Emily Moyer, and she came out and said, what is it with all of the teenage priestess oracles? What is it? It's always this, teenager. And so they're always sexual objects. And I can't run away from an answer. It is because they look at beauty as the coming to fruition or the fruiting. And when your society views fruiting as beauty, then you're going to have all sorts of athletic competitions for the fruiting members of your society. And you're going to have contests. And you have both talked about it at Atlanta, and running. And the boys are there. And whoever can catch them and blah. This contest. And this boy's got to step up. Who can help this kid? Oh, I know. Medea. Medea can help him. Right? Why? Remember, education. The tech is all coming from that feminine side. And we have totally overlooked this in history. We've totally overlooked the influence. I love it. I'm starting to think perhaps the modern manifestation of the eunuch, because what do you do when you remove your testicles? You feminize. And if you have the right plants and animal substances to Christ yourself with, you can end up going through that transformation where you become the Attis who has that unattainable link, inexpressible link to the Great Mother. Maybe we need that. Do we need that? What about the first eunuch? People won't like it if you say eunuch, but the first trans president. Wouldn't that be interesting? Huh?
Well, and we got to point out, though, we also see it on the other side with the trans mask. Athena is bi-gendered, as we've talked about, and you showed in the sources. And it's that same force for reason. Like what we're seeing is this reason and the exploration of wisdom and this taking of responsibility and going through the cycles of generation causes you to see that other side. You have to engage with that which is other to you. You have to experience that totality and come together. And that coming together through that refinement, through that reason, produces Athena, produces Attis, right? We also got to remember, right? Attis is also kind of like Zagreus. The stories are so similar. What is the story of Attis, right? He gets distracted by these beautiful nymphs. And so he dives into the waters, but then he gets bound down in the mud and he's stuck with the nymphs. So the Great Mother sends the beast, which happens to be the word theriac, at least in Julian, sends the beast, Helios theriac, to come get him out of the mud. And then he goes through a process of divine imitation where he dresses like her and ascends back to the one. What happens to Zagreus? He's a divine child placed upon the throne who's distracted by the spinning top, who falls into matter and is ripped apart, becomes the unfolding of creation. then he's reformed as Dionysus, and then back to Phanes. It's the same thing, is it not?
Yeah, it's the physics. It's all the physics describing the very same physics of the cosmos. Let me ask you something that'll really make people uncomfortable. We have this theme over and over again about boys, young boys, being raised as girls and sexually initiated by said group of girls. And it makes me wonder, in this kind of education, what is it? Because it's for the best of the best. This is where they're sending people like Achilles, right? We have that, all of a sudden, that elevation, right? And they're doing this in different mysteries. At birth, mothers are doing this. They're elevating their children. So there's the practice of elevating through putting into a system that is sexually active.
We see
makes me wonder.
ways, though. We see it. Okay, we do see the feminine way with Achilles, which creates Achilles, but then we see the way with the freaking centaurs, and it creates the manliest brood of all human history, Heracles, right?
It depends. Where do you send? And I'm saying this in all sincerity, historically, where if you are a wealthy person in, say, Thessaly, you're going to have to make a decision. Where do I send my 9-year-old son? Am I going to send him to the centaur who's going to teach him every different discipline that they know so well, particularly the drugs, poisons, right? And that will lead into, by the way, what else do the centaurs teach? Hunting, the use of those poisons, right? All the medicine. That's where they're gonna apprentice. But that centaur is, we call them centaurs because they have horse-sized genitalia that they use in teaching. And you and I don't have a problem with that. Okay, we don't have a problem with that. There is a sexual element of teaching that is spread across all of these heroes, spread across all of them, right? Sexual teaching. So much so that it becomes a debate. Who is this friend of Achilles, right? Who's this guy friend of Achilles?
I don't know. They're just guy friends. Yet when they die, they mourn each other, and their ashes are mixed with each other's blood in a shared urn. But they're just buddies. They're not anything more, right?
And Achilles sacrifices.
Proclus, they're clearly lovers. They're like, it's so ridiculous. They're buried together in the same urn.
Think of the culture that at the same time can take a kid, Achilles, and educate him with girls, one of which he has clear relations with, an offspring, right? And remember, these are girls who are all part of the aristocracy, right? So this is the, aristocratic kind of goings on. Your average farmer is not going to be doing this, right? But the same people that are educating Achilles with the girls end up influencing him, where when Patroclus, his lover, dies, murdered, he goes out and he gets, I don't know how many it was, 30 or something like that. Maybe it was 13. I don't know what it was. It was enough. What are they? The handsomest of those young captives, right? The most pleasing, the handsomest of those young captors. And he sacrifices them right there on the funeral pyre and burns all their bodies together. I think it was 13. I can't remember how many. But think about the person that can do that. What is it in that education? What is it in that Amazonian Hecatic education that gets us to the level that I don't have a problem with taking out some kid that we just captured in war and cutting his throat, along with 12 of his best friends over my lover's grave, right? Do you see the awareness? Is something I always say, or I used to always say in mythology courses, because you don't get a lot of history and culture in the mythology. You just get pounded with the mythos, with the narrative. So it's easy to miss out a lot of the history that is sitting there in the myth. If you stop for a second and think about what's going on and what it takes to do these kinds of things, remember they are putting people into states, altered states, and purifying them so that they can be elevated. Death to them is a place that they have already gone, seen, and come back from. And when you come back from it, apparently, it changes the way you perceive the world around you, and you act different. Yeah. Oh, God, love it.
It's wild to think about. It's so insane. And it just made me think, I want to end with one final thing about Hecate I wanted to ask you about, because it was one of the most terrifying images that I saw when I was digging into the Greek. One epithet that came up in the PGM is the blood drinking wraith. And I immediately thought of Ligeia, right? Because you have this idea of this roaring ghost that comes to drink your blood. What is with Hecate and the blood drinking? Because that comes up. And what is with her being this apparition? What's going on in your thoughts?
Yeah, that's her vampiric kind of manifestation. They'll talk about Lamia as a type of Hecate. She's the great swallower. She what does she do? She consumes children, right? So you have to actually get rid of Lamia. Now, if I tell you this and you're thinking physics, the physics of the quantum reality, like they're doing, you're thinking, oh, okay, so when my child is born, whatever I need to do medically, religiously, to prevent the influence of the Lamia. Why? Because child sacrifice, right? Child sacrifice is so a part of the culture. People talk about, oh, the Molochites or whatever, they had a special this and hoo-ha. Bullshit. There are people sacrificing children all over. It is a reality. Abortion is a reality, and much of the abortion in antiquity took place post-birth, right? They called it exposure. Exposure. Why are you going to take your kid out and expose them? Shut up. This is the rite that is Hecatic. This is she who works. Why? Because I have been there. My wife has been there. She has seen. She knows her body, when she produces, she knows that she will be sending that weakened soul right back to the source of the great mother. Right? So do you see how abortion takes on? If you've been baptized into that dark star and you've seen the reality that we are the reflection of, you know that you're sending that soul back to the source. It's not just people who are, oh, God, Disney. Oh, we're afraid. Oh, here's Moloch. Oh,
no. They don't just hate their kids or something. No, there's a whole methodology and thought behind it. We don't have to agree. We don't have to like it. But to think that these people are insane is also to be ignorant. Right? There was one, I know I said that was the final thing, but I forgot. Our dear friend Gandhi sent me a source and he wanted me to get your opinion on it. This comes from John Lidas from his On the Months, and it's talking about the Chaldean tradition in relation to Hecate. And it says, from whence they, the Chaldean tradition, I hand down the mystical doctrine concerning the four element and four-beaded Hecate. For the fire-breathing head of a horse is clearly raised towards the sphere of fire, and the head of a bull which snorts like some bellowing spirit daimonion is raised towards the sphere of air, and the head of Hydra is a being of sharp and table nature is raised towards the sphere of water, and that of a dog is having a punishing and avenging nature is raised towards the sphere of earth. What's going on with Hecate's secret head? Why has she got four heads?
I noticed at the end, it talks about the punishing nature. Look what they're breeding into their dogs, right? They're hunting dogs, and they want that punishing nature. I see a lot of anthropology. And I see a lot of custom that we don't have. That's John Littis, by the way, is the source that tells us, hey, listen, people, just sit down for a minute. Listen, there was this prophetess. She's immortal, man. Don't worry about it. She's immortal. And she said X, Y, and Z. And the only way for you to understand it is her phrase. Hey, dummy, it's all analog. You can't understand it otherwise. So relax and follow the analog. And John Littis is the one who brought that out. Now, John Littis has whole sections on divination via lightning. Divination via lightning. Can you believe they're getting that plugged in to nature, where everything in their environment is some sort of element that can be manipulated from a distance by a Hecatic possessed vessel? Right? Oh, God, I love that. Where is she? I don't know where she is. I'm pretty sure, though, like that Pope, Joan, I'm pretty sure we're going to have to lift up her skirt. You know what I mean? Just so we're all aware of where we stand. And I'm betting on either by nature or some sort of, wonder. I'm betting on a wonder, and it's going to all make sense. And humanity will sigh, right? And we'll know.
Watch. No, it makes me think of that famous statue of Aphrodite where she's lifting her skirt and she has the phallus, the erect phallus, right?
That scares some people. That thing causes panic, right? Imagine Pan with his satyrs. What do they all have? Erections, big ones. And they're chasing you with those erections, right? What kind of cult have we entered? Is there, you have to be there, I guess. You really have to be there. But that mania is the same mania that Hecate produces. And you can see that in the language. So don't think Hecate is not sexual. There's a ton of sex. You don't have that darn yunks with his screaming, right? What is that? Right? And the bird is screaming, and they're supposed to be drawing back that soul, because that soul fell in, he saw the next door neighbor, and now he's not seeing me anymore. Right? How can I?
Hey, I almost forgot about the fucking jinx. What is going on with the jinx in the strophalon? And because I keep seeing all these Aphrodite love potions and Hecatic love potions that say you got to use the yunks, but also the yunks is a synonym for the strophalon. So what's going on?
Performance, Snappy. Performance. No, I'm serious. I can only tell you from the text that they exist. Right. And that the witches are using them. And we have authors who were talking about them using them. Right. And I listened to a paper at a conference once that was just on the yunks, all the sources of the yunks. Where do you go? Where do you find it? What does it mean exactly? Why in Theocritus does John Tzitzis later say, no, this is not the way it is? Or why does he add X, Y, and Z? It's I cannot tell you, but I can tell you. There's something that the sound, there's always something with sound, and it's always in the context of their friggin' songs and their music, right? And they're using some kind of vocalizations, and that's what people think that magic writing that is the dragon tongue in the PGM, that's what they think that is. Somehow those marks are some kind of musical or some kind of spatial thing. Right? And it's not a spoken. It's what they call in Takita, things that are done into the silence, into the void. Do you know, we didn't mention one thing Hecate did, but I'll stop my end here because that's good. She's the lover of the Eremon. She is the one who lives in the void. She is the dawn bringer who lives in the void. So could you say that Hecate is the devil? Yes, you could, right? And she is the bringer of light. So when you're in the void, remember what that Vatican priestess said. When you're in the void, understand the analogy and then apply it. Oh, that's what it means, right? These aren't just tales for us to sit around and say, oh, what a neat story. I think I'll publish a book about it. No, they're ladders to get to a place where you are integrating with that will from a distance, when you're working that will from a distance. And that's what scares people, right? And they say, oh, you must be crazy. Whatever.
Who cares what these people have to say? The people who know and who are listening, they get what you're about, Ammon. And we've seen that time and time again. But yeah, I just wanted to point out, I read the Tsitsi stuff, his commentaries on the Chaldean oracles. And when he talks about the strophalon, he says that when it gets whipped, that's when it cries like the jinx bird or the yungi, So yeah, you're right. Now I remember, it has to do with the cries of the spinning top, which is so weird. But maybe I'm gonna have to track down this wryneck yunks bird. Maybe it makes an Iwa as a scream. Wouldn't that be wild?
I'll bet you there's some kind of vocalization that when you're in exactly the right place chemically, and they've done all this stuff to you, and you've been through the initiation, you've been Christed, and that thing starts its vocalization. I bet it does something. I bet it's just simply that sound that causes you to enter a state, which if it is, that's really cool, because that's like an organic, dimensional time machine or something, you know what I mean? That you could do that. And that's what they claimed it was anyway. It's almost like...
It reminds me think, because they say that about the Timbalon, that's the heartbeat of Cybele, and that's one of the passwords in order to go through the mystery, right?
I remember the one. Don't forget the big one. When you reach that, and by revealing this, I'm risking the lightning, right? But when you reach that river where everybody else drinks, don't drink from it. Keep going. And then ask for the waters of memory, right? That's what you should do. All those saffron-robed muse priestesses. Wouldn't it be sad?
Mother, right? Memnosine.
Yeah. And imagine if you had a relationship with them. Imagine if you were one of those boys who wanted to transform, right? You wanted to go through that feminization. Imagine if you had a relationship with one of these priestesses who could have guided you, who could have been a mentor, right? Who could have said, well, you're going to need this and this drug, and this is going to do this to you. It's almost like, because we don't have a system that facilitates that, whatever it is that is the benefit of that feminized masculinity, you lose it in society, because you don't have a system for making it. You know what I mean? So you end up with priests that rape children to the tunes of hundreds of thousands, and they never get punished, and people get paid off, and it's just, oh my God. Oh.
Well, it's a natural element of our society. That feminine will come back through music. We'll call it the hippies, glam rock, David Bowie. You'll see it. It came back once they got a little freedom and TV and electronics. The rock and roll, they called it. It'll come back.
Trans people who have always been here will always be there. There's always non-binary people. This is something that's common in all of human history, all of human society. Just because the culture represses it doesn't mean it goes away. In fact, it often becomes more intense and insane. Right? As we see with someone like Marquis de Sade, you oppress sexuality. What do you get? You get the Marquis. This is what happens.
Okay, wait a minute. Go ahead. Did you like the one? It was I had to stop reading a couple of times, right? And I found out, I went on YouTube. I went on YouTube and I found that people have this response to 120 Days of Sodom. People have the same response to that. They stop reading it because it's just too much. The scene that broke me was the one with the guy who would leave his a little chamber pot out for the young girls to come poop in. And then he would take that poop and he would do things with that poop. And it was shown that he could not come to a point of exaltation unless he did it that way. Sometimes I think that maybe the dude was not crazy. Maybe he was a genius, and he had seen something that other people have not seen, because we've covered it up with this monist plaster. And we're not going to go back there, right, with this monist plaster, but you can't help it. Your psyche is built around the fact that there is somebody out there who can only come to climax via, some kind of scatological interaction, some kind of thing like that. It's part of us. You know what I mean? It's part of us.
Makes me think of the right stuff that you were showing. You showed it in both the Greek and the Christian with the smearing of the poop. And then you also, Aleister Crowley does the same thing because he sees these other mystics doing it and he's got to try it too. It's like, oh my God.
So, that's my answer for you, Ammon. You're talking about aliens. There you go. What would you prefer, the aliens or the poop?
What if it's both? What if it's aliens and they're going to take you off somewhere to be smeared with poop? I think that would be the worst. Unless
isn't that what they do when all these people get abducted? That's what they say. They say that they look at their poop and look at their stomachs and analyze us. They analyze our poop, because it was called the master of the bed pot, or the master of the bedchamber. And in English society, the kings and queens there at Windsor Castle, they had somebody checking their poop. Even to this day, they look at the poop first before they discard it to analyze it, the doctor.
To go full circle even, and to be really gross, one of the epithets I found that I didn't include, but I will now, was, I can't remember it in Greek, but it's for Hecate, it's she who eats filth. And it's like the dirt, the poop. She who eats the poop.
Hey, why? When your doctor is drinking your urine, or at least smelling your odor, right, and tasting your urine, because your feces will have a very peculiar stink to it, and it'll tell you everything about your diet that you need to know. Sometimes I think this is coming through the dogs that these midwives are keeping around. Did you notice, Snappy, that Hecate is associated with childbirth and the facilitation of childbirth? There's a reason. There's a reason for that poop, right? The poop is just one of those fluids, one of those bodily productions that you have to, that will determine, you can use it too. There's a lot of poop using, but it's mostly animal that I've seen, animal poops, like those doves that you were talking about and whatnot, and the crocodiles.
Yeah, the crocodile dung is contraceptive because of the pH when you put it inside the vaginal cavity. But also imagine the dogs, the licking, like Asclepius. So if the symbol of the dog with childbirth is right there, the dogs, you would take an injured person to dogs back in the ancient times to have the dogs lick the cuts, to lick the wounds, because of the healing components in their tongue.
Makes you wonder why they said Cerberus had that spume that was as powerful. His mouth fluids, the stuff on his tongue, were as powerful as that bow of Heracles, right? Able to kill. It's got a power. It's divine power. Did they recognize the healing? That's what it sounds like you're saying. They recognize the healing side of that as well.
Also, I saw this reference to the dogs of Hecate, and the dog. Specifically, they said in some versions, they say that it was a dog, and they call it Hecuba, or they say it's also related to the Agathos daimon, and that it's this force of her that brings the prayers between the three worlds, because she is that guardian of the threshold, and she ensures, like in theogony, you have to pray to her first, they say, because she ensures your prayers get sent to where they're going. Well, later writers say this is because she has the agathos daimon, which is her dog. What do you think of that?
No, I think it's gorgeous. I think the imagery is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, imagine you've got this queen who is the ultimate access to everything, to all three levels of existence, and that she is represented just by the sound of that barking dog, that barking hunter, that barking predator, that black. And whenever they had these things, for some reason, they only had black. They insisted, right? You've got to keep these breeds black, pure black. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they're all involved in nightly activities. That's another thing that was in that hymn that you looked at. They are the ones. Who else is active at night? Well, let's see. Bacchic mystery, right? Wait, the priestesses of Diana. Oh God, right? And then all of a sudden you can see emerge out of it that history. There was a lot of coolness. There's a lot of stuff that just I read about it and I think, man, that would be so cool just to see them do that, right? Just to see what that's like would be so cool. But it's so foreign to us because you're never going to get paideia like we see in the Septuagint in Tobit. You're never going to get that paideia again. As long as you have a monist power that has cut off sexuality. Now, if you had a monism that had Aphrodite as its one god, you may get that type of paideia back again, but you won't with a monist who's the type of throwing the acid in the face.
It makes me think of in India. There's this huge fight between the Shaivites and the Shaktas, who are the worshippers of the mother goddess and Shiva, who's kind of like Dionysus, and they have this qualified monism where it's like, yes, everything is one, but it's also the many, and you have to affirm both. And to get to the one, you have to go through the beauty of nature, which is that mother. And they rebel against the Vedantins who say that, or the Advaita Vedantins who say that everything is only absolutely one without distinction. There's only the darkness. And you have to like basically resist everything. Everything in nature is an illusion. So what you get with some of these monists is they like, no, well, it is an illusion, but it's also not an illusion. It's that paradox that you got to kind of wrap your mind around. It gets so wild.
Just get used to it, buddy. Don't try not to think about it too hard. What if let me ask you a question. I know we got to go. What if there is an element of education that is sexual? What if there's an element, let me ask it again. What if there's an element of education that is sexual that has been used historically and oppressed actively to create a society where our own thoughts will turn, where our ancient or classical polarity can be turned 180 degrees, and that's where we are. What if there is something in sexuality that must facilitate religious understanding? That's what I want to know. What if there's a reason they had colleges for people to be able to express the sexual reality of a creator to a person? And the reason we're messed up is because we haven't had access to that knowledge. What if there's something really, really important about the worship of Aphrodite?
I think you're definitely on to something, Ammon, because I mean, trauma in regards to that kind of, in regards to sex and just human and like male-female relations and just an understanding and acceptance of sex is probably the most defining issue of Western society, if not global society, right? The suppression of the feminine and this rejection or this vilification of the sexual, all of the shame that's surrounding it. It's just human,
Achilles feels no shame for the fact that he has male lovers. The society is not shaming him for that. So he's able to express at a level that's higher. You know that's better for the brain. You know that's better for the human brain than to repress, right? And I think that just the setups, the fact that we go on the weekend, we watch an athletic competition, and out come these newbies, and they're all showing their breasts, right? Do you know what that does? It purifies the perverts, right? When you're exposed to the bloom as a natural process of life, and you don't hide it away and say, shh, it's a secret. When you don't do that, people mature through that deviant perversion, right? That Larry Nasser perversion. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Is it something that they understood about the human psyche, and they, through their initiation rituals and through their religious rituals, that they somehow, I often think of, I'll just throw this one in, the Lupercalia. When you're going around, right? I'm a Roman kid, right? I'm a kid in junior high, right? And I'm going to strip naked, and I'm going to run with all of my peers in front of everybody in the city. And the girls who are my age mates are going to be stationed along the way, and they're going to be throwing things, and I'm going to run up to one of them, the one I think is cute. And while I'm standing there naked, I'm going to stripe her with a skin that's got a dye on it, and everybody's going to see it, and they're going to say, oh, look at that. Isn't she gorgeous? She's got somebody who wants, whoo, look at her. She got striped the hell out of, right? There's something, if you think about that, none of the Lupercalia could be done today. Absolutely not anywhere. You would get arrested, right? You just couldn't do it. Is there something efficacious? And I'm going to ask this, and people are going to say, oh, God, look what he's telling. He's turning the world into a place of pedos. No. I'm saying, why did they do it? Is there an advantage educationally, psychologically, physically, medically? Why the hell are they doing it? Right? And that's what we owe the past. We don't owe them to change our times. We owe them to acknowledge what was actually happening. So when Jesus is arrested in a public park with a naked boy screaming, I'm not a child trafficker, it's not a surprise to us about why he's doing that. I'll stop.
Wild. What do you think, Dion?
I think he was doing Hecatic rituals, necromantic rituals, raising people from the dead with drugs, feminine rituals, and you had a threefold nature, the Trinity, triune. Sounds pretty Hecatic.
But I think fundamentally you're right. We if we oppress too much sexuality, it comes out in the most vile sorts of ways, and we as a society need to figure out how do we confront this in an open and humanistic and realistic way that makes, because even those of us who have perversions, they can be consensual and done within loving ways, right? And this is the thing, why are things perverted, right? We have when we look back at the ancient Greek society, right, they had a very different ideas of what was perverted then to what we do now. And this is something that is such a cultural determined thing. In my mind, as long as it's consensual, as long as people are in agreement and are doing it for fun in a mutual beneficial way, what the flip is the problem,
Yeah, there was somebody out there who heard us talking about 120 days of Sodom with the poop bowl and the using the poop. And there was a certain percentage of people out there who that maybe turned on a little bit, and there's a few people who it turned on a lot. And there's people that it repulsed. There's people that it repulsed to such a degree that you think, oh, they're so far over. They're probably in the closet, right? And they want that. And that's what Marquis de Sade is saying. Right? He's showing you voyeuristically, he's showing you a dude take a little girl's poop and smudge it all over himself and sit there and smell it and come to climax while he's doing it. You cannot look into the mirror and see some horror. You just can't do it. It's there. And guess what? It's in you. And for some reason in antiquity, they came up with ways to mold, educate, and heal people who were stuck in specific places. So they wouldn't go out and do the things that we do naturally. You know what I mean? And you read about it and you're like, damn, how do people get to that point where they just think, oh, I can go out and do X, Y, or Z, horrendous, horrendous, heinous acts. Anyway, I'm just BSing now. Shut up, Hillman. We're done, right?
We're done. Yeah. It's just wild to think about. No, but I think you're touching on something that's so true, right? The suppression of the feminine and the suppression of sexuality go hand in hand, right? And I'm not saying that we need to return back to an ancient understanding of sexuality by any means, but we need to recognize and see that this kind of sexuality, variety of expression is human, and that we need to be able to confront this in a safe way in which we can educate people so that they can live proper, full lives as adults. Because if you don't deal with it, if we don't deal with it as a society, you will get abusers, you will get the extremes, you will get the most insane stuff. We need to have people coming together with respect and love, right?
Here. I totally agree. Respect and love. Dion's into respect and love, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. Respect and love.
I mean, we like to talk a lot of wildness, but recognize these are ancient sources and we're looking at them from our privilege in the present, and it's like, we're not idolizing. Like, the idea is to look into the past, to imagine a reality into the future, something that's better and built upon the past. I'd love to see a return to a golden age, but that doesn't mean I want to go back to that golden age where you had Hecate eating people. Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, let's wind down, guys. Any last words for our audience tonight, Ammon?
Eating babies maybe is not as bad as it sounds. Hail Satan.
Any final words, Dion?
Yeah, it's called stem cells, and everyone's doing it. Not everyone, but a lot of people are paying millions of bucks on a daily basis to get these stem cells. Just saying, that's what's going on. But likes, subscribe, share, be kind to each other, protect the innocent. You're going to end up being freaky one day, but do it with responsibility. Do it with some respect and love for your fellow brothers and sisters. So, yeah, take it away.
Amazing. I also wanted to say I have a message from our pal Neil. He was unable to join us because he is moving, but he will be joining us for our next get-together sometime in September. So thank you guys for joining us. This was so much fun. And we'll be back again with Ammon and Neil in the future for another Occult Exploration Society. So until then, hail Satan.